All right. Hey, good evening, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Monday, September 19th, 2022. This is your very late evening tropical update. It's almost September 20th at this point. We're recording this just before 11 p.m. Eastern Time. I did promise you guys a video. Wanted to get something out tonight. Real life got in the way for most of the day. But we're coming in tonight for a quick video on the latest regarding Hurricane Fiona. She's still pounding parts of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. She is pulling away, though, set to lash the Turks and Caicos tonight and tomorrow, and then Bermuda later this week, and even into Newfoundland and Nova Scotia over the weekend. So Fiona's story is far from over, but she's not the only player in town tonight across the tropical Atlantic. We're also watching this wave here out in the central Atlantic. This is going to move into the Western Caribbean, and our computer models starting to pick up on some potential trouble down the road, potentially for the U.S. Gulf Coast and the Western Caribbean, and even possibly the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So we got a few things to cover tonight. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can, but you guys know me. Brief is not something that's really something I'm any good at. But we'll do our best. So the evening on Hurricane Fiona, evening update on Hurricane Fiona. We are close to 11 p.m. advisory, but not quite out yet. As of 8 p.m. earlier tonight, maximum sustained winds are 105 miles an hour. I think that's going to go up here soon. I don't know if it's going to go up at the 11 p.m. advisory, but I would imagine by tomorrow, Fiona is going to be a major hurricane. She looks very impressive tonight. But the Hurricane Center holding her at 105 for now, moving to the northwest at 10 miles per hour. And you can see the forecast cone has not significantly changed. Fiona is still expected to begin to pull more north and eventually northeastward. She's going to go through the Turks and Caicos, again, where hurricane warnings remain in effect tonight. And those conditions will continue through much of Tuesday before she pulls away on Wednesday. The storm's not moving terribly fast, so several more hours to go of heavy rain and high winds. So pull away and intensify throughout the most of the week, peaking sometime around Thursday or early Friday as she passes by Bermuda, where you could also, guys, in Bermuda, be potentially under the gun for a major hurricane, or at least a very close call from Fiona. Hurricane Center now explicitly forecasts this to become a Category 4 major hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, would be our first major hurricane of the 2022 season, and of course our first Category 4 subsequently of the season. Fiona is definitely going to become a strong hurricane and much probably a larger hurricane as she passes. So Turks and Caicos tonight, Bermuda, I would expect at least tropical storm warnings up for you later this week, if not hurricane warnings as she passes by. But it's been a rough couple days, guys, for Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. This is the rainfall totals from Puerto Rico tonight. A catastrophic flooding event has come as a result of Fiona, and again because the storm actually passed by the southwest tip of the island, but those rain bands just trained and trained and trained for days. I mean, we saw this with Harvey in Florence. Now we see it with Fiona. Just wrong place, wrong time. And that's why we always stress that the category system doesn't always fully communicate the impact of these storms. Like Fiona is going to go in the books as one of the worst flooding disasters in Puerto Rico's history, and it was quote unquote only a Category 1. It was a strong tropical storm until right before it made landfall, and yet because of the orientation of Fiona and the way everything's set up, they were crushed with 20, 25, and what you're going to see when these rain totals are actually fully verified, you will see rainfall totals over 30 inches. I have no doubt. So, very, very bad flooding situation in Puerto Rico tonight. Pretty much the entire island remains without power. It's a bad situation. Dominican Republic got it too. A lot of mudslides, heavy rain. They also took a direct landfall as Fiona kind of bounced across the Mona Passage and landfalled over in the Dominican Republic's coast as well. Evening satellite presentation of Fiona is a pretty impressive hurricane, or at least becoming more impressive by the hour. We'll show you the IR first as she left the Dominican Republic earlier today. That eye cleared out really quick and stayed out for a couple hours, but it's clouded back up now. When these storms are intensifying, they do that sometimes as the thunderstorm activity builds in that central dense overcast around the eye. You can see these vertical hot towers firing off pretty consistently. A lot of those little pink bursts you see right there are indication of those little vertical hot towers going off. Fiona is dealing with just a little bit of wind shear. There's not a much, but if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that this side of the hurricane is pretty flat, and then there's an expansive outflow in the quadrants over on the east side, indicating that there's some sort of westerly wind shear component still impacting the storm. But as Fiona gets stronger, she's going to be able to slowly push back against this, and it's not going to bother her as much as it did when she was a weaker tropical storm. The stronger these storms get, the more it takes to slow them down. So she's going to start overcoming those odds over the next couple of days. And with that poleward and in equator where outflow channel is pretty well established on north and south ends. She's going to have no problem taking advantage of this very warm water over the southwest Atlantic and intensifying pretty quickly. Recon data this evening does show that the storm is at least a Category 2 hurricane, close to Category 3 intensity. Pretty common to see spikes in the eye wall or the eye for the temperature increases. Pretty common flight level wind pattern in SFMR readings. So Fiona definitely is on her way up tonight and is only getting stronger as she goes. So that's kind of the latest on Fiona. I also wanted to quickly go ahead and go over the latest with our Central Caribbean wave. You're going to see a lot of hype of this over the next couple of days. Our computer models are starting to indicate that this wave right here, moving at about 50 degrees west, is going to be moving generally off to the west over the next few days. This is going to wind up in the Western Caribbean later on this week. This tonight, the National Hurricane Center gives this about a 30% chance of development over the next 5 days. And it's going to take a little while because this thing has to gain some latitude. It's pretty far south right now, and it's going to have to deal with kind of the jet wash of Fiona in the upper levels. When you have a strong hurricane like Fiona, there's a lot of wind pushing out the storm in the upper levels, so this is going to kind of shear it for a couple of days. But as this system creeps into the central and western Caribbean, unfortunately, we're looking at a situation where the environment is going to be pretty conductive for tropical development. And if this wave survives and stays intact when it gets to the Western Caribbean, we could be dealing with a potential issue on our hands. So it's too early to freak out and all that. You guys know we don't really do that around here. But I'll kind of show you what's latest on the GFS, the Euro here. So the GFS shows us right here. This is the wave we're going to go back to tomorrow morning. Our wave would be down here, kind of close to the Central American coast. You can already see the outflow of Fiona, definitely pushing down on the system. So it's going to have a lot of wind shear over the next couple of days. Let me go ahead and take you through the rest of this week. We go into this weekend. The GFS begins to show the development of the storm south of Hispaniola sometime on Sunday. And this is where the environment begins to become more favorable. So the GFS is developing this pretty quickly near Jamaica, and may or may not be the case, but I want to kind of pay attention more to the actual setup here as we get into early on Tuesday. So this is set for 12Z on Tuesday. What we're looking at is a really favorable environment. So we're looking at this area right here, the Western Caribbean, on Tuesday. The water, incredibly warm. You're talking about 30-degree plus Celsius water, upper 80s in terms of Fahrenheit, plenty of warm water. Nothing's touched this year. And you have these beautiful dual outflow channels in the upper atmosphere. You've got outflow channels from an upper trough that slowly kind of sat over the eastern U.S. This isn't a trough that's going to be necessarily imparting that much wind shear on the storm. It's more going to be helpful in terms of exhausting the storm, exhaust mechanism as in like your car's exhaust, if you will. And she's also going to have this nice outflow channel to the south. You have dual outflow channels, light wind shear aloft, and the European model shows pretty much the same thing. You have this kind of upper trough, and you've got great outflow aloft in pretty much all quadrants. This is a recipe for problems if a storm is developing around this time in this area. So that's kind of what the models are showing, is that we'll have a favorable environment. Now, it also the other issue we have here tonight is that if you have a storm developing in this area, we look at the 500 millibar chart to kind of get an idea of the steering flow, and you have high pressure centered over the Great Plains. You have a strong high pressure over the central and western Atlantic, and you have this unusually strong trough set between them. Well, this would likely coax whatever's down here to begin to pull north into the Gulf of Mexico. Sometimes these storms just stay flat and they stay into Mexico, but given this pattern, anything that gets in here is going to want to come northward. This is shown again by the GFS and the Euro pretty convincingly. The GFS shows the trough to be a little bit stronger and the orientation of the highs to be a little bit different, but it's the same general pattern. Now, both models do take this up into the Gulf of Mexico as a potentially very strong hurricane. You can see here the break in the ridges kind of remains. You one ridge right here, one ridge here. The storm moves between them. It moves into the eastern Gulf of Mexico by the end of next week. So we're pretty far out. The European shows this too. By the end of next week, the Euro and the GFS both show a strong hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico at the week's end. So with that being said, does that mean that there's going to be a strong hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico at the end of next week? No. What it means, though, is that we have something to look at. Our models are telling us, hey, something's going on. We need to look at this. Okay, that's what we're looking at. It's too early to be panicking. It's too early running for the hills, and it's too early to be posting one-run model screenshots. Tomorrow morning, we could wake up, and these models could not have this, because I bet you as you go back and look at the previous runs of the GFS, it shows some wildly different stuff. This is one run before that, one run before that, and one run before that. So just today, the GFS has ran 4 times. It didn't have any hurricane there this morning. Then it had a hurricane south of Cuba at the end of the week. Then it had a hurricane in the Yucatan Peninsula at the end of the week. And it had a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. You see how these just 4 runs, everything looks completely different? Your high and low pressures are all changing. Yeah, this is why we don't trust our models this far out. But we do know that they're trying to tell us something, and we need to keep an eye on it. So don't freak out. Don't run for the hills. There's no reason to panic yet. It is a climatologically favorable time of the year for the Western Caribbean. This is about when that starts looking good. The pattern looks concerning if you just look at the overall environment for the next 4 or 5 days. So yes, we're going to watch this very carefully, but there's a lot of time to go on this one. So we're going to keep an eye on it. Wouldn't worry just yet. So our friend in the Western Caribbean, later on we'll keep an eye on. Of course, Fiona's track, the Turks and Caicos, Bermuda, and Newfoundland, Nova Scotia are all going to get smacked by this in one form or another. And we have one little more wave here. We're not worried about him though. Could develop, could not. Who cares? But that's what I got for you guys this evening on your topical update. Again, we're going to keep an eye on all this stuff this week. I'm going to be pretty busy, real life stuff, but I'm going to do my best to try to keep the videos going, or at least when I can. We'll share this again tomorrow morning, and we'll be back with more as soon as we have it. So that's what I got for you guys tonight on your topical update. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.